The morning sun blazed over Taylor, Texas in August of 1878, and Willa Sutton's entire world had shrunk to the narrow shadow cast by the whitewashed church steps where she and her 6-month-old daughter lay huddled together. Exhaustion had claimed her sometime before dawn, her body giving out after 3 days of walking dusty roads with nothing but the clothes on her back and the baby wrapped in a thin shawl that had once been white, but now bore the stains of desperate travel. Warren Wright reined in his horse at the edge of Main Street, his eyes immediately drawn to the crumpled figure on the church steps. He had been riding since before sunrise to pick up supplies for his ranch, 10 miles outside of town, but something about the sight made him pull his mare to a complete stop. The woman was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark hair that had fallen loose from whatever pins had once held it. The baby in her arms made small, whimpering sounds that even from this distance tugged at something deep in his chest. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the hard, packed earth with soft thuds. Warren was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of ranch work, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water after rain. He approached carefully, not wanting to startle her, but she did not stir even when his shadow fell across her face. "Madam," he said quietly, kneeling down, "still nothing." He reached out and gently touched her shoulder, and her eyes flew open with such sudden fear that he immediately raised both hands. "Easy now. I am not going to hurt you." Willa scrambled backward, clutching her baby so tightly that the little girl let out a wail of protest. Her eyes were wild, darting from Warren's face to the empty street behind him as if calculating whether she could run. But exhaustion had its claws in her deep, and she sagged against the church door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "When did you last eat?" Warren asked, keeping his voice gentle. She stared at him for a long moment, her jaw working as if she could not quite remember how to form words. 2 days, she finally whispered. "Maybe 3. I fed the baby what I could, but there was not much." Warren felt something crack open inside his chest. He stood up and held out his hand to her. "I have a bed and a cradle," he said simply. "My ranch is not far. You and your baby can rest there, get some proper food in you. No strings attached. You have my word." Willa's eyes filled with tears that she angrily blinked away. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford, but desperation was a powerful motivator. She looked down at her daughter, at the small face that had grown gaunt over the past week, and knew she had no real choice. She took his hand. Warren helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. The baby had quieted to soft, hiccuping sounds, and he could see now that she had dark eyes like her mother and wisps of brown hair that curled against her damp forehead. "What is her name?" he asked as he guided Willa toward his horse. "Lily," Willa said, her voice barely audible. "Her name is Lily." He nodded and helped her up onto his mare, then swung up behind her, careful to give her enough space while still keeping a steadying arm around both her and the baby. The ride to his ranch took nearly an hour, and Willa drifted in and out of consciousness the entire way, her head occasionally lolling back against his shoulder before she jerked herself awake again. The Wright ranch was modest but well kept, with a sturdy house built from local limestone and a barn that stood proud against the endless Texas sky. Warren had inherited the land from his father 3 years ago and had been working it alone ever since, building up a small herd of cattle and a reputation for fair dealing. He guided the mare right up to the front porch and dismounted, then carefully lifted Willa and the baby down. "Can you walk?" he asked, and when she nodded uncertainly, he kept one hand on her elbow as he led her inside. The house was cooler than the outside air, with thick walls that held back the worst of the August heat. He steered her toward the bedroom, where a large bed stood covered in a faded quilt his mother had made before she died. "You can rest here. I will bring some water and food." Willa stood in the doorway, staring at the bed as if it were a mirage that might disappear if she blinked. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, and there was something raw and broken in her voice that made Warren pause. "Because you need help," he said quietly. "That is reason enough." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for deception and finding none. Then she walked to the bed and sank down onto it, cradling Lily against her chest. Warren left them there and went to the kitchen, his mind racing with questions he knew better than to ask just yet. He heated water on the stove, made a simple meal of bread and cheese and cold chicken from the night before, and filled a pitcher with fresh well water. When he returned to the bedroom, Willa was sitting propped against the pillows, her eyes closed but her hand still moving in slow circles on Lily's back. The baby had fallen into a deeper sleep, her small mouth opened slightly. Warren set the tray on the bedside table and stepped back. "Thank you," Willa whispered, opening her eyes. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "Do not worry about that now," Warren said. "Just eat and rest. We can talk later." He left her alone and went outside to tend to his chores, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman and child in his house. He mucked out the stalls and fed the horses and checked on the cattle in the near pasture, all while wondering what circumstances had brought Willa Sutton to his doorstep. It was not his business, he told himself firmly, but the lie sat bitter on his tongue. Inside, Willa ate slowly, forcing herself not to gulp down the food even though her stomach cramped with hunger. Lily woke after an hour and fussed, and Willa fed her, grateful that her milk had not completely dried up despite the starvation. The baby ate greedily and then fell back asleep, and Willa allowed herself to lie down, her eyes drifting closed despite her determination to stay alert. She woke to the sound of hammering and sat up with a start, her heart pounding. The light coming through the window had shifted, suggesting several hours had passed. Lily was still sleeping peacefully beside her, and Willa slipped off the bed and went to the window, looking out into the yard. Warren was in the barn, and through the open doors she could see him working on something made of wood. She watched him for a moment, taking in the easy competence of his movements, the way his shoulders shifted under his work shirt. He did not look like a man with ulterior motives, but then again, she had been wrong about men before. By the time evening arrived, Warren had finished the cradle. It was simple but sturdy, made from pine with smooth edges and rockers that moved gently when touched. He carried it into the house and found Willa in the kitchen, looking uncertain as she stood near the stove. "I hope you do not mind," she said quickly. "I wanted to make something for dinner, to thank you." Warren set the cradle down carefully. "You do not have to do that." "I know," Willa said. "But I need to do something useful." He nodded, understanding the need to not feel completely powerless. "All right then, I will not argue with a home-cooked meal." He gestured to the cradle. "For Lily. Figured she would sleep better in her own bed." Willa walked over and ran her hand along the smooth wood, her eyes filling with tears again. "You made this. It is nothing fancy, but it is solid." "It is perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." They ate dinner together at the small kitchen table, and the silence between them was almost comfortable. Warren did not press her with questions, and Willa was grateful for that, though she knew she owed him an explanation. Finally, as she cleared the plates, she spoke. "My husband died 3 months ago," she said quietly. "Kicked by a horse. We were living on his brother's farm outside of Waco, but after he passed, his brother said I could not stay. He had his own family to feed and no room for a widow and a baby who could not pull their weight." Her voice hardened. "His wife made it clear I was not welcome, so I left." Warren felt anger rise in his throat but kept his voice level. "That is a hard thing. I am sorry. I tried to find work in Waco, but no one wants to hire a woman with a baby. I thought maybe here in Taylor I could find something, anything, but I ran out of money 2 towns back. I have been walking ever since." She looked at him directly. "I am not looking for charity, Mr. Wright. If you let me stay, I will work for my keep. I can cook and clean and help with whatever needs doing around the ranch, just until I can figure out what to do next." "You can stay as long as you need," Warren said. And it is Warren, not Mr. Wright. Over the following days, a routine began to establish itself. Willa proved to be as good as her word, taking over the cooking and cleaning with a quiet efficiency that made the house feel more like a home than it had in years. She mended the tears in Warren's work shirts, scrubbed the floors until they shone, and tended a small vegetable garden behind the house that had been neglected since his mother's death. Warren found himself looking forward to coming inside after a long day's work, to the smell of dinner cooking and the sound of Willa humming to Lily as she rocked the baby in the cradle he had made. He was careful to maintain a respectful distance, sleeping in the small room off the kitchen that had once been a pantry while Willa and Lily kept the bedroom, but he could not deny the growing awareness between them. It was in the small moments that Warren began to fall. The way Willa laughed when Lily grabbed at her nose with surprising strength. The fierce determination in her eyes when she tackled a difficult task. The vulnerability she showed in unguarded moments, when she thought no one was watching, and the weight of everything she had lost settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. For Willa, it was harder to trust the growing warmth in her chest when she looked at Warren. She had been married before, had thought she knew what love looked like, but her late husband had been a practical match arranged by their families, affection born of proximity rather than genuine connection. What she felt building between her and this quiet cowboy who had offered her shelter without expectation was something different, something that both thrilled and terrified her. 3 weeks after her arrival, a storm rolled across the Texas plains with the suddenness that characterized late summer weather. Warren had been working on repairing fence posts in the far pasture and came running back to the house as the first drops began to fall. He burst through the door soaked to the skin, and Willa immediately moved to the stove to heat water for coffee. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death," she said, throwing him a towel. "I will have something hot ready in a minute." Warren retreated to his room and changed, emerging in dry clothes just as thunder cracked overhead loud enough to rattle the windows. Lily, who had been napping in her cradle, woke with a wail of protest. Willa scooped her up and bounced her gently, murmuring soothing sounds. "She does not like storms," Warren observed, accepting the cup of coffee Willa handed him. "Neither do I, if I am being honest," Willa admitted. The lightning flashed again, illuminating the kitchen in stark white light, and she flinched despite herself. They sat together at the table as the storm raged outside, closer than felt entirely safe. Warren told her stories about growing up on the ranch, about his father teaching him to ride before he could properly walk, about his mother who had loved to sing while she worked. Willa found herself sharing memories, too, of her childhood in Missouri, of the sister she had left behind when she married, of dreams she had once harbored before life had narrowed her world to simple survival. "You think you will stay in Taylor?" Warren asked, and there was something careful in his tone that made Willa's heart beat faster. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I need to find permanent work, a place of my own. I cannot impose on your hospitality forever. What if you did not have to leave?" The words came out before Warren could stop them, and he saw Willa's eyes widen. "I mean, what if you stayed here, not as a guest, but as something more. Willa set down her coffee cup with a hand that trembled slightly. "Warren, what are you saying?" He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain that poured down in silver sheets. "I am saying that this house has felt more like a home in the past 3 weeks than it has in 3 years. I am saying that I look forward to seeing your face every morning and hearing Lily laugh. I am saying that I think I am falling in love with you, and if you feel even a fraction of the same, maybe we could build something real here together." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the drum of rain on the roof and Lily's soft cooing. Then Willa stood and crossed the room to stand beside him at the window. "I am scared," she admitted quietly. "I was married before, and it was not a love match. We were content enough, but there was no passion, no real partnership. I do not know if I know how to be what you need." Warren turned to face her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "You are already everything I need," he said. "You are strong and kind and beautiful, and you have brought life back into this place. I am not asking you to be anything other than yourself." "I think I am falling in love with you too," Willa whispered. "It terrifies me." "Then we will be terrified together," Warren said, and he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand, but when Willa's hand came up to curl in his shirt and pull him closer, the kiss deepened into something that spoke of hunger and hope and the promise of healing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lily let out a gurgle that sounded remarkably like approval, and they both laughed. "Marry me," Warren said. "I know it is fast, but nothing about this has been conventional anyway. Marry me and stay here and let me be a father to Lily. Let me give you both the life you deserve." Willa searched his face and found only honesty there, only the kind of steadfast devotion she had not known she was capable of inspiring. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed a week later in the same church where Warren had first found Willa sleeping on the steps. The ceremony was small, attended only by a handful of Warren's neighbors and the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Taylor. Willa wore a simple blue dress that Warren had bought for her in town, and she carried wildflowers that grew along the creek that bordered his property. Lily fussed through the vows, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Warren kissed Willa with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. The first months of their marriage were an adjustment, learning the rhythms of sharing a life with another person in all the intimate ways that mattered. Warren was patient as Willa learned to trust that his kindness was not conditional, that she did not have to earn her place in his home or his heart. He delighted in Lily, treating her as his own daughter without hesitation, making her laugh with silly faces and teaching her to clap her hands. By October, the heat had finally broken, and the Texas sky stretched overhead in endless blue. Willa stood in the kitchen making preserves from the last of the summer fruit, watching through the window as Warren worked with the horses in the corral. He had taken on an extra hand to help with the ranch work, a young man named Thomas who was eager to learn and hardworking. Lily was sitting on a blanket on the floor, playing with wooden blocks that Warren had carved for her. She was nearly 10 months old now, pulling herself up on furniture and babbling in the way that suggested actual words were not far behind. Willa felt a wave of contentment wash over her so powerful it almost made her dizzy. This life, this family she had stumbled into through desperation and luck, had become more precious to her than anything she had known before. That evening, after dinner and after Lily had been put to bed, Warren pulled Willa outside to sit on the porch and watch the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and tucked her against his side, and she nestled into the warmth of him with a sigh of contentment. "I have been thinking," Warren said, and there was something nervous in his voice that made Willa sit up and look at him. About what? About Lily. I want to adopt her properly, make her legally my daughter. I know she had a father, and I am not trying to replace him, but I want her to have my name. I want everyone to know she is mine. Willa felt tears spring to her eyes, and she cupped his face in her hands. James would have liked you, she said softly, speaking her late husband's name for the first time in months. He was a good man in his own way, but he never would have been the kind of father you already are to Lily. She is lucky to have you. We both are. Then you think it is a good idea? I think it is a wonderful idea, Willa said, and she kissed him with all the love and gratitude and passion that had been building in her heart. They went into town the following week to speak with the circuit judge, and the adoption was finalized with surprising speed. Lily became Lily Wright officially, and Warren insisted on buying a round of drinks for everyone in the saloon to celebrate, much to Willa's amused exasperation. On the ride home, with Lily sleeping in Willa's arms, Warren reached over and squeezed her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me a family, for taking a chance on a stranger who offered you a bed and a cradle, for making my house a home." Willa smiled, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Thank you for seeing me on those church steps, for not riding past, for giving me a reason to hope again." Winter came gently that year, with cold nights that never quite turned bitter and days that remained clear and bright. Willa discovered she was pregnant in early December, and the joy on Warren's face when she told him was something she would remember for the rest of her life. He became even more protective than usual, insisting she rest more and not lift anything heavy, until she finally had to threaten to hit him with a wooden spoon if he did not let her do her normal work. "I am having a baby, not dying of consumption," she said with exasperation, though her eyes were soft. "I can still cook dinner without needing to lie down." "I just want to make sure you are safe," Warren protested. "Both of you, we are perfectly safe," Willa assured him. "Now go check on the cattle and let me work in peace." Lily took her first real steps on Christmas morning, wobbling across the kitchen floor into Warren's waiting arms. The pride on his face was matched only by Willa's delight, and they spent the rest of the day encouraging her to walk back and forth between them, laughing at her determined expression as she concentrated on each step. The baby came in late August of 1879, a year and a day after Warren had found Willa on the church steps. The labor was hard but not dangerous, attended by a midwife from town who had delivered half the babies in Taylor County. When the midwife finally placed a squalling infant in Warren's arms, his eyes went wide with wonder. "You have a son," she said with a smile. Warren looked down at the red-faced baby, who was screaming his displeasure at being thrust into the world, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not thought possible. He carried the baby to Willa, who was exhausted but smiling, and placed him gently in her arms. "Hello, little one," Willa murmured. "We have been waiting for you." They named him William after Warren's father, and if Warren cried when he wrote the name in the family Bible, no one commented on it. Lily was fascinated by her baby brother, wanting to touch him constantly, and they had to watch her carefully to make sure her affection did not become overwhelming. The years that followed were full in the way that a good life should be. The ranch prospered, Warren's herd growing until he had to hire 2 more hands to help manage it all. Willa's sister Clara came to visit in the spring of 1881, traveling from Missouri with her own husband and children, and the reunion between the 2 women was tearful and joyful. Clara stayed for a month, and by the time she left, she had extracted a promise from Willa to come visit her the following year. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Grace born in 1882, and another son, Henry, in 1885. The house that had once felt empty and echoing was now filled with the constant noise of children playing and arguing and laughing. Warren expanded it, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen where Willa could cook for their growing family. On quiet nights, after the children were in bed and the ranch work was done, Warren and Willa would sit together on the porch just as they had done that first autumn of their marriage. They would talk about their days, about the funny things the children had done, about their plans for the future. And sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, Warren's arm around Willa's shoulders, and simply be grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together. "You ever think about that day?" Willa asked one evening in the summer of 1886, "when you found me on the church steps?" Warren pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every day," he said honestly. "It was the best day of my life, even if I did not know it then." "I was so scared," Willa admitted, "so certain that no one would help me, that I had reached the end of everything. And then you appeared like something out of a story and offered me hope when I had none left." "I think we saved each other," Warren said quietly. "I was just going through the motions, working the ranch but not really living. You brought color back into the world. You and Lily and all the children we have had since. You made my life worth living again." Willa tilted her face up to kiss him, a kiss that still carried the same spark it had that stormy afternoon in the kitchen years ago. "I love you," she said, "more than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Warren replied. "Every single day, more than the day before." From inside the house came the sound of one of the children calling for water, and they both smiled and stood up to go tend to whoever needed them. This was their life now, full and chaotic and beautiful, built on a foundation of kindness offered without expectation and love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. Lily grew into a bright, curious girl who loved horses as much as her father did, and Warren taught her to ride almost before she could properly walk. William was quieter, more contemplative, with a love for books that Willa nurtured by reading to him every evening. Grace was wild and fearless, always climbing trees and getting into mischief, while Henry followed his older siblings around with devoted determination. As the children grew, Warren and Willa made sure they understood the value of kindness and compassion, of helping those who needed it without asking for anything in return. They told the story of how their family began, of a desperate woman and her baby and a cowboy who stopped when he could have ridden past. They wanted their children to understand that the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of a life, that offering help to someone in need was never wasted. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful in Taylor County. Warren's reputation for honest dealing and fair treatment of his workers spread, and young men seeking employment often showed up at his door asking for a chance to prove themselves. He hired based on character rather than experience, remembering that he too had once been young and uncertain. In 1890, when Lily was 12 and talking about wanting to become a teacher, Warren and Willa decided to build a schoolhouse on their land. They brought in a teacher from Austin and invited all the families in the surrounding area to send their children. It was a small thing in the grand scheme of the world, but it made a difference to the families who had been struggling to give their children an education while managing ranch work. Willa threw herself into organizing the school, working with the teacher to make sure there were books and supplies, and that every child who wanted to attend could do so regardless of their family's ability to pay. She remembered all too clearly what it was like to have nothing, to be desperate and helpless, and she was determined that no child in their community would go without if she could help it. The years continued to pass in the way that years do, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle that got sick and crops that failed, but through it all Warren and Willa faced everything together. Their love had deepened and matured, becoming the bedrock upon which their entire family was built. In 1895, Lily married a young ranch hand named David, who had been working for Warren for 3 years. The wedding was held at the church in Taylor, the same church where Warren and Willa had married all those years ago, and Willa cried happy tears as she watched her daughter pledge her life to a good man who loved her. Warren walked Lily down the aisle, and when he placed her hand in David's, he whispered something that made them both smile. William went east to study law in 1896, his sharp mind and love of learning finding a natural home in the complexities of legal work. It was hard to watch him go, but Warren and Willa were proud of the man he had become, principled and kind with a fierce dedication to justice. He promised to come home for the holidays, and he kept that promise faithfully. Grace surprised everyone by declaring that she wanted to be a doctor, an ambition that was unusual for a woman, but not impossible. Warren and Willa supported her completely, finding her books on medicine and anatomy and encouraging her curiosity about how the human body worked. She was determined and brilliant, and they had no doubt she would achieve her goals. Henry, their youngest, showed every sign of wanting to take over the ranch when Warren was ready to step back. He had his father's ease with animals and his mother's head for managing the business side of things, and Warren began teaching him everything he knew about running a successful operation. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, Warren surprised Willa with a trip to San Antonio. They left the children in Lily's capable care, now that she and David were living in the foreman's house on the property, and set off like young lovers on an adventure. They stayed in a hotel that felt impossibly fancy, ate in restaurants where other people did the cooking, and walked through the streets hand in hand like they had not done in years. "Thank you for this," Willa said as they sat by the San Antonio River watching the water flow past. "For everything. For the life you have given me." Warren shook his head. "You have it backwards. You are the one who gave me a life. Before you, I was just existing. You taught me how to really live." "We taught each other," Willa said softly. "That is what marriage is supposed to be, I think. Two people making each other better." "Then we have done it right," Warren said, pulling her close and kissing her with all the passion and tenderness of their first kiss in the kitchen during that long-ago storm. They returned home to find that Lily was pregnant with her first child, news that filled them both with excitement and a touch of melancholy at how quickly time was passing. The baby, a boy they named James after Lily's birth father, was born healthy and strong in early 1900, and Warren held his first grandchild with trembling hands and tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Warren whispered, looking up at Lily with wonder. "You did good, sweetheart." "I had good examples," Lily said, smiling at both Warren and Willa. "You taught me what a real family looks like." As the new century dawned, the Wright family gathered together at the ranch to celebrate. William had come home from his law practice. Grace was preparing to leave for medical school in Philadelphia, and Henry was courting a sweet girl named Martha, whose family had a ranch bordering theirs. They sat around the large dining table that Warren had built to accommodate their growing family, and Warren stood to make a toast. 22 years ago, I found a woman and a baby sleeping on the church steps in Taylor," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I offered them a bed and a cradle, thinking I was doing a simple act of kindness for someone in need. What I did not know then was that I was actually finding my family, my purpose, my entire future. Willa, You have made every day of the past 2 decades worth living. You have given me children I am proud of and a home filled with love. I am the luckiest man in Texas, maybe in the whole country." He raised his glass and everyone followed suit. "To family," Warren said. "To second chances and new beginnings. To love that grows from the smallest seeds of kindness." "To family," everyone echoed, and the sound of their voices raised together filled the house with warmth and joy. Willa wiped away tears and stood to embrace her husband, and their children gathered around them, and little James gurgled happily from Lily's arms. This was what they had built together, a legacy of love and compassion that would endure long after they were gone. In the years that followed, Warren and Willa transitioned gradually from running the ranch to letting Henry take over the day-to-day operations. They remained involved, of course, offering advice and help when needed, but they also took time to enjoy the fruits of their decades of hard work. They traveled a bit, visiting William in his law office and Grace at her medical practice, spending long summers with Lily and her growing family. Grace became one of the first female doctors in Philadelphia, specializing in helping women and children, carrying on her mother's legacy of compassion for those in need. William opened a legal practice that focused on defending those who could not afford expensive lawyers, remembering the lessons his parents had taught him about helping others. Henry married Martha in 1903, and they had 4 children of their own who ran wild on the ranch just as their father had done. On a warm evening in the spring of 1908, Warren and Willa sat on the porch watching the sun set over their land. They were both in their 50s now, with gray threading through their hair and lines on their faces that spoke of a life well lived. Warren's hand found Willa's, their fingers interlacing automatically after 3 decades of practice. "I have been thinking," Willa said quietly, "about that day on the church steps, about how close I came to giving up completely. If you had ridden past, if you had not stopped, I do not know what would have happened to Lily and me." "But I did not ride past," Warren said firmly. "I stopped because I could not do anything else. You needed help and I had help to give. It was as simple as that." "It changed everything," Willa said. "One moment of kindness and suddenly my entire life went in a different direction. We built all of this from that one moment." Warren pulled her closer, tucking her under his arm the way he had done countless times before. "We built it together," he corrected gently. "You brought the love and the warmth and the laughter. You made a house into a home. You raised children who are good people who go out into the world and make it better. That was not just me stopping my horse. That was you choosing to trust me to take a chance on building something new. We made a good team," Willa said with a smile. "The best team," Warren agreed. "And we are not done yet. I plan on being your partner for a lot more years." "Good," Willa said, "because I am not finished with you either." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple, watching the first stars appear. From inside the house came the sounds of family. Henry and Martha getting their children ready for bed. The comfortable domesticity of another generation growing up in the home Warren and Willa had built together. The years continued to roll past like the steady flow of the river, each one bringing new joys and sorrows as life always does. They lost friends to age and illness, celebrated the births of more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, watched as the world around them changed and evolved. The automobile came to Taylor, and electricity, and other modern conveniences that would have seemed like magic in 1878. But through it all, the core of what Warren and Willa had built remained constant. Their love for each other only deepened with time, weathering every storm and celebrating every triumph together. They had created something that would endure long after they were gone, A family built on a foundation of kindness and compassion, and the belief that everyone deserved a second chance. Lily often brought her children to visit, and she would tell them the story of how their grandmother had been found sleeping on the church steps with baby Lily in her arms, how their grandfather had offered help without hesitation. The children would listen with wide eyes, amazed that their family had such dramatic origins. The important thing to remember, Lily would tell them, is that when you see someone who needs help, you stop. You do not ride past. You offer what you can, even if it is just a kind word or a moment of your time. You never know how much it might mean to someone. Those lessons were passed down through generations, becoming part of the Wright family legacy. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew up hearing about the day on the church steps, about the cowboy who offered a bed and a cradle, about the love that grew from that simple act of kindness. Warren and Willa celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, surrounded by a family that had grown beyond anything they could have imagined that day in Taylor. There were children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a vast network of love that stretched across Texas and beyond. They renewed their vows in the same church where they had married, with Lily standing beside her mother and all of their other children gathered close. When the preacher asked if Warren would take Willa as his wife, to have and to hold for whatever years remained, Warren's voice was strong and clear. "I would marry her again every single day if I could," he said. "She is my heart, my home, my everything." Willa cried happy tears as she repeated her own vows, looking at the man who had saved her life in more ways than one. "You gave me hope when I had none," she said. "You gave me love when I thought I did not deserve it. You gave me a family and a home and a life beyond my wildest dreams. I would choose you 1,000 times over." The party afterward was enormous, spilling out of the house and across the ranch property. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed a small army. Warren and Willa danced together under the stars, moving slowly to a tune played on a fiddle by one of their grandsons, and everyone watching could see the love that still burned bright between them after 4 decades. As the night wound down and the guests began to leave, Warren and Willa found themselves back on the porch, the place where they had spent so many evenings together over the years. They sat in the swing that Warren had hung shortly after William was born, rocking gently as they watched the last of the visitors depart. 40 years, Willa marveled. Where did the time go? Into building something beautiful, Warren said simply. Into raising our family and creating a legacy we can be proud of. Do you have any regrets? Willa asked. Warren thought about it for a long moment, then shook his head. Not a single one. Every choice I made, every path I took led me to you, led me to this life. How could I regret any of that? I regret the years before you, Willa admitted quietly. I wish I had met you first, wish you had been Lily's father from the beginning. But then I think about the journey that brought me to those church steps, and I realize that maybe it all had to happen exactly the way it did. Maybe I had to go through everything I went through to appreciate what we have. Everything happens for a reason, Warren said. I believe that. I believe you were meant to be on those steps, and I was meant to ride into town that morning and see you there. I believe we were meant to build this life together. Willa leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I love you, she said, more now than ever before. I love you too, Warren replied. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we have left. They sat together on the porch swing, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a love that would stand the test of time. Around them, their family slept peacefully in the house they had filled with warmth and laughter and joy. Above them, The stars shone bright in the Texas sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss and every kiss since. Warren and Willa lived well into their 80s, spending their final years surrounded by the family they had created together. They passed within 6 months of each other, Warren first and then Willa, as if she could not bear to be without him for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a headstone that read simply, "Together forever." At the funeral, Lily stood with her own children and grandchildren gathered around her, and she told the story one more time. The story of a desperate woman sleeping on church steps with her baby, and a cowboy who said he had a bed and a cradle. The story of how kindness can change lives, how love can grow from the smallest seeds, how family is not always about blood, but about the people who choose to stand beside you through everything life brings. They taught us that love is a choice you make every single day, Lily said, her voice breaking with emotion. They chose each other every day for more than 40 years, and they built something beautiful from that choice. That is the legacy they leave us. Not just this ranch or the family they created, but the knowledge that kindness matters, that compassion matters, that stopping to help someone in need can change the entire world. The Wright family continued to thrive for generations after Warren and Willa were gone, their descendants spreading across Texas and beyond, carrying with them the lessons they had learned. And every single one of them knew the story of how it all began. On a summer morning in Taylor, Texas, in 1878, when a cowboy stopped his horse and offered hope to a woman who had run out of reasons to believe in happy endings. It was a love story for the ages, proof that sometimes the most extraordinary things can grow from the simplest acts of human kindness, and that true love, when nurtured and cherished, can weather any storm and build a legacy that endures forever.